Está sendo transmitido no YouTube streaming. Maybe start now? Okay, good morning to you all. On the behalf of the Director of the Faculty of Arts and Humanities, I extend a warm welcome to you all and present my compliments to Professor Irad Malkin. Nice to meet you. It's a pleasure and an honor to be here presenting this last conference. I would like to begin by thanking him for accepting the role of visiting professor at this faculty for the duration of this academic semester. I'm confident that the contributions of his seminars, conferences, classes have been and will continue to be invaluable to our institution. Thank you. I have no doubt that this last lecture, the Gulbenkian Lecture in the Humanities, entitled, let's see if I can do this well, Drawing Lots from Egalitarianism to Democracy in Ancient Greece, which we'll be talking about, will be equally fascinating. I'm sure it will be very, very interesting. Furthermore, I would like to express my gratitude to the scientific coordinator of the Center of Classical and Humanistic Studies, Dr. Carmen Suarez, and of course our team for all the work developed. Finally, I would like to acknowledge the support of the Calouste Gulbenkian Foundation in bestowing the visiting professor grant, without which the lectureship that we are going to hear would not have been possible. Thank you all, and I think this will be a fascinating lecture. Thank you.
Thank you.
Então, cara subdiretora da Faculdade de Letras, professora Isabel Ribeiro, cara professora Carmen Soares, cara professor Irad Malkin, I'll switch to English now. Great pleasure to be here at the university. Great pleasure to meet you finally. We have been giving scholarships for the humanities for a long time now. We have a dedicated line, and we give for merit students, so undergraduate students from low-income families. We have 90 scholarships, and 18 are from this faculty. We have the New Talents program, where we each year have 10 to 15 students. One is from this faculty as well. Angela, is she here? No. Okay. We invited her. We have scholarships for non-Portuguese researchers residing abroad to come to Portugal and do research in arts, history. He was our scholar.
Yes.
You were our scholar last year. Yes, you were. Yes, you were.
Just the right.
So, and visiting professorships. We aim to foster excellence in international cooperation and to advance the development of national talent among researchers, academics, and students. I'm delighted to share that we're going to have 3 more scholars, professors coming to this faculty next year. So thank you to Professor Luís Antônio Umbelino, Professor Frederico Lourenço, and Professor Diogo Falcão Ferrer. So for this very first edition, the one where we have Professor Irad Malkin, we wanted to make sure that we had exceptionally high standards. We wanted to make sure that people understood that this was a program only for the best. And I think you've set a remarkable benchmark for the program. So I thank you, and I thank Professor Carmen Soares for bringing him. Okay?
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Maybe you want to leave one?
in subtle ways. Olá, bom dia. É um gosto ter-vos aqui todos. E depois desta revelação, nós estamos esfuziantes. Now I switched to English. My first words are not the words I have written, sorry. But this was really a great surprise that this year, the 2025 scholarships, professorships for humanities will come all to our faculty. And all.
No, it's 5 and 3.
Ah, you have 5. Great. That's even better because last year we had only 3. So but okay, we have 3. That's great. And as a coordinator of the Center for Classical and Humanistic Studies, I am very, very proud. And I would like to start by thanking Professor Irad because he was the one responsible for attracting the interest of all that come now, and to thank the members of our research center that had applied for these new 3 professorships. And now, what I prepared to say to you today. Esteemed Subdirector at the Faculty of Arts and Humanities, Professor Ana Isabel Ribeiro. Okay, sorry. Esteemed Head of Gulbenkian Scholarships, Dr. Luís Plácido, dear colleagues, students, and general public, whether attending in person or following us via the Center for Classical and Humanistic Studies YouTube channel. Roughly 1 year ago, our faculty and center received the good news that Irad Malkin, a candidate I personally proposed for the first edition of the Calouste Gulbenkian Foundation Visiting Professorship in the Humanities program, ranked first and secured one of the only 3 grants award amidst 115 applications across 25 countries. Today, we come to the end of an intense and enriching series of 4 undergraduate lessons, 3 open masters and doctoral seminars, 2 intensive course sessions, and 2 lectures aimed at broader audiences. To reflect on this period, I would like to publicly express how much our community of classical studies professors and students in Coimbra, particularly those focused on ancient Greek history, has gained in terms of new perspectives and internationalization of knowledge. Through its professorship in the Humanities program, the Calouste Gulbenkian Foundation enables us to observe and participate in discussions on central themes in the study of the ancient Greek world and its dialogue with modernity, such as Hellenic identity and religion, colonization and networks, the egalitarianism and democracy. This experience was particularly enriching because the sessions were held in person, allowing for significantly more interaction between us and our visiting professor. Bonds that would not have otherwise formed took shape, be them academic or personal in nature. They say a picture is worth 1,000 words. Having Professor Irad Malkin, a born orator, personally elaborating on the content that he explored in his vast bibliography, allowed us to witness how the spoken word can surpass the written word read in silence. His captivating, gripping rhetoric has driven us to explore his works such as Religion and Colonization in Ancient Greece, Myth and Territory in the Spartan Mediterranean, The Returns of Odysseus, Colonization and Ethnicity, and A Small Greek World, Networks in the Ancient Mediterranean. For this final lesson, he will guide us through the work he co-authored with Jocelyn Bloch, drawing lots from egalitarianism to democracy in ancient Greece. Before I give him the floor, so we may learn from the lecture he prepared for us with the rigor to which we have become accustomed, I would like to share with you our greatest institutional wish. And this wish is the following: that Professor Malkin's time as a Gulbenkian visiting professor in Humanities at the University of Coimbra builds on his extensive history of roles as visiting professor and visiting scholar at institutions such as the Department of Classics at Oxford University, the École Normale Supérieure Centre des Études Anciennes in Paris, the Laboratoire Anthropologie et Histoire des Mondes Antiques, ANIMA in Paris, the Max Planck Institute in Berlin, the Classics Department at Johns Hopkins University in Baltimore, and the Istituto Italiano di Scienze Umane in Florence. It was an honor. It is a pleasure. And now, Professor Irad Malkin, the floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you all so much. I'm overwhelmed by this remarkable introduction and acceptance of me as this visiting professor in the humanities by the Calouste Gulbenkian Foundation at this university. I feel very honored, and I have to say my experience here with this variety of classes and subjects and lectures taught also helped me to sort of think about the entire corpus of my work and how its various parts reflect on each other. Today, because it is a lecture of this nature, it will not be just a lecture about antiquity. It will be a lecture that somehow will try to connect the so-called relevance of antiquity to our own world, a relevance that in this case is yet to happen. I hope you will understand what I say later. So, behind me on the screen, there's a quotation by Herodotus from a supposedly fictional, although he insisted it wasn't fictional, a debate in the Persian courts as to what is the best regime possible for us Persians. Okay? And so one suggests a monarchy with a Persian king on top. The other suggests an oligarchy, namely a select group of people who share power equally among themselves but are far superior to anybody else. And the third option is democracy, called isonomia, which was in fact the first term for democracy in ancient Greece. Demokratia happens somewhat later. And this is what supposedly the promoter of democracy is saying. He's saying, the rule of the people has in the first place the loveliest name of all, isonomia. It determines offices by lot and holds power accountable and conducts all deliberating publicly. Look at these essential ideas of democracy, among which it determines offices by lot, which is precisely 180 degrees diametrically opposed to the we, in the Western world at least, see democracy since the 18th century. It was the later 18th century that produced the instruments of democracy that have hardly changed until today. And there's this growing dissonance between those instruments, beautiful as they are, for representative government, and our own. So all this, it started, actually, my interest in ancient drawing lots with modern concerns as a citizen of the present, seeing the issues with modern politics. And so, after 6 years of work, we produced, my colleague and I have about 2/3 of the book, about the 3 centuries preceding the Athenian democracy. And Josine Bloch, a great specialist in ancient citizenship, she wrote the part about governance. I'll show you the table of contents in a minute. The book is here. You may want to pass it around and just give it back at the end of the lecture. So, what's in that book? This is, first of all, a claim that we're talking about an institution of drawing lots that is pan-Hellenic. It's ubiquitous. It's all over the Greek world. We find it from the Black Sea all the way to Sicily and France. And let's not forget, this is the Greek world. The Greek world is not Greece, which is the modern country first declared in 1821. It is where Greeks used to live. As Jan Coletti says in 1864, Greece is where Greeks are. And they are spread around points of settlement along the coast of the Black Sea and the Mediterranean. Not contiguous, it's not an empire, there's no center to this. It's a huge network of Hellenism. So, what do we have in this book? And what my great excitement was to find out that Athenian democracy, established at the very end of the 6th century BC, came after 3 centuries of drawing lots. And so these are the chapters of the book, basically, slightly differently worded now. Lotteries, divine and human, that's the first chapter. Lotteries, divine and human, the world of the Homeric epics. When does the lot reflect the will of the gods? Lots, oracles, divination, and the notion of moira. A chapter then on sacrifice and feast, social values and the distribution of meat by lot. You can already see a wider spectrum of the use of drawing lots. The second part of the book, equal and fair, inheritance, colonization, and mixture. So there's a chapter on inheritance, partible inheritance by lot, which is what Greeks used to have instead of primogeniture, namely the elder. It's not always all Greeks, but it's quite a significant phenomenon. Then, drawing lots on the Athenian stage. How did playwrights, Athenian playwrights, present the drawing of lots in their plays? And then a huge chapter, which comes from my own specialization, founding cities and sharing in the polis, namely the city-state. Equality, allotment, and civic mixture. Then comes the third part, which is Josine's part, on lot and governance. And we end with an appendix. This research was funded also by the Israel Science Foundation, creating a vocabulary database, philological database of the vocabulary of ancient lots, and prepared by Elena Jaffe. And today we also prepared this one. We prepared a database that is online. You're welcome to use it. Kleros, maybe lot, as you know, or GIL. Okay, so put down this little address if you wish. So again, why my interest? Because I'm a citizen of the present, and I noticed that the viruses that attack democracies in the West are spreading, like the plague at the time. They are familiar, but have never before been so prominent. The breakup of social cohesiveness, dwindling responsibility to the idea of a single political community, derision and alienation even from politics, tribalism, sectarianism, populism, civil strife, and the immense power wielded by interest groups and political lobbies. There is, however, a way to cut the Gordian knot, return to the roots, and listen to the inventors of democracy. The ancient Athenians found their inoculation. They used drawing lots to select and to rotate each year some 15% of the mostly male population who fulfilled a wide spectrum of public functions, like 10 government ministers, the archons, were selected by lot, as well 500 council members, the boulets, 11 members of the board to see the docks in the Piraeus, 6,000 judges every year. By the way, the whole thing rotates every year. Yes? Priests, sometimes even priestesses, and many more besides. Like most ancient societies in Athens, the concept of citizenship included women too, albeit with no political rights in our sense. Aside from the selection of office holders, in Athenian democracy, procedural lotteries that establish terms, determined, for example, who would be the chairperson of the Supreme Council for the next 24 hours. They rotate every 24 hours by lot. Imagine a modern chairperson of a parliament doing that. It's hard for me to assess this. So just try to envisage, for example, you were selected by lot to be one of the 6,000 judges. You have no idea what trial you're going to try. It's determined by lot in the morning, as well as who's going to be with you. Who are the at least minimum 199 other judges will be in the team that will start in the morning and end in the evening. So you are selected by lot to be a judge. You are selected by lot to have your team with you. And the case is also assigned to you by lot. And the trial ends in the evening. How can you bribe anyone in this terrible situation? There's no way. So, in such a system, there was no room for political parties in our sense. And lobbies representing special interests were almost impossible to maintain because you could never know whom to influence. There was the frequent rotation, the relatively short periods of office, no more than a year, and the large numbers involved. The lottery is never ambiguous. Today, candidates often smear each other, and losers bear a grudge. However, since the drawing of lots is impersonal, resentment against persons who got their position through the drawing of lots disappears and facilitates the political process. By the way, it's also very cheap, the conduction of lots. So the Greek political lottery was not just an efficient mechanism, it reflected sets of values that we should consider important for our own democratic regimes, but are hardly manifest today. Aristotle defined the state as a partnership, a koinonia, with good reason, since modern democracies have betrayed the ancient Greek imperative of met echein tes holeos, sharing in the city, sharing in the city. A citizen was to be homoios, was to be like any other citizen. A notion of equality, deserving equal portions of the law, which literally is the meaning of isonomia. Isos is equal, nemin can be to allocate, to designate, and so on. So it's important to note that we're talking about fairness here as a fundamental value. The drawing of lots is not a value. Okay, that's important to remember. The drawing of lots in and of itself is not a value. It's a device, mostly for collective, equal, or equitable distributions. It can be goats, it can be portions of sacrificial meat, it can be expensive cups of golden booty, and so on. It is irrelevant when the sums are equal. For example, the island of Sifnos, they discovered gold, so they decided every year to distribute equal portions of gold to every citizen. There's no need to draw lots here because, as in Athens, 10 drachmas are 10 drachmas. Okay, it's always the same. There's no, so you need to draw lots for the difference, which is the meaning of homoios, to be like itself. It covers the difference, as it were, because most people don't have exact equivalence as modern. I mean, this is a big theory about modern alienation in economics. The moment you invented coin and no longer barter, therefore now it's become anonymous and too equal, as it were. So it's interesting that when the Athenian democracy was established, the isonomia was established in around 507, 506 BCE, the Athenians fought a war in Judea, conquered it, and distributed 4,000 equal lots by lot to Athenians chosen by lot. The very same year that they established equal portions for every citizen as a democracy. So how you see the concrete and the abstract converge, as it were. The abstract equal portion of law for every citizen, the concrete equal portion of land for every Athenian colonist. I mean, that those things happen together, I think, is not accidental. Well, unlike today, when we delegate power to elected representatives, in Athens, the idea of citizens as sharers took concrete expressions in the form of actual participation, whether through the posts distributed by lot or directly in the assembly. The assembly was not chosen by lot. Okay? The assembly was the totality of Athenian citizens. The assembly ecclesia was the sovereign body of the country. The notion of representation, which is so common today, seems not to have even existed. Most significantly, the lot involved a much higher proportion than today of citizens from whom the polis, the city-state, the city, transcended their own specific personal interest. Now imagine how much you would learn about your country's economy, labor conditions, communication, gender relations, and whatnot, if you just happen to be selected by lot to a board overseeing your national airport. Well, that's it. Like the ancient docks of the Piraeus, which was 2 weeks a year. You become an involved citizen. In Athens, politics became a duty rather than a mere right. Western societies are in danger of being torn apart by sectarian identities, the opposite of sharing in the state. That sharing can only happen when citizens actually participate in the frameworks that are mixed by lot, as happens with our contemporary, although very tiny, juries, say in American courts of 12 jurors, or in European, or sometimes even 6. It's not 200 or 500. 200 is just the minimum, by the way. You can get up to 500 and more. So, too many discrete life experiences today encourage alienation and the shedding of the political from personal priorities. The process is ongoing today, dangerously, I think, fragmenting society. But ancient Greeks, not just the Athenians, had an answer. A major role for drawing lots was a mixture of society. In Athens, people from all walks of life, living in areas that were sometimes quite distant from each other, were allotted into 10 civic units called phylae or tribes, which forms the basis for most Athenian lotteries. For example, 50 men from each of the 10 mixed tribes, why they're mixed, I'll say in a minute, were chosen by lot every year to serve in the Supreme Council, the boule of the Athenian people, that totally consisted of 500 persons. You couldn't go be selected there more than twice in your lifetime, which also implies a civil registry, so people knew who was going to be there once or twice. Today, sectarianism has become the blight of democracy that could rip society apart, a process that social media and its own tribes amplify in disturbing ways. The lot and the mixture of mandates would easily prevent that. Now, this is a scheme you find on the internet for the forms of tastefulness that frankly nobody fully understands until today, but basically the idea is mixture. This is the first constitutive act of the founding of democracy in human history. And what was the first constitutive act? Mix it all up. divide the country into 30 thirds, as it were, and mix those thirds through some process which we don't fully understand, so that if you lived in a city, if you lived in the hills, if you lived on the coast, you find yourself in a single tribe with a person from the coast and a person from the hills and a person from the city. Okay, so that's d'un seul coup, at one stroke, Cleisthenes cuts the entire network of local patronage, patrons and clients, dependencies, and so on. This is also the basis of a mixed Athenian army, in short, a cohesive, homogenized society, which is all created by this kind of somewhat complicated feature of drawing lots. Those 30 treaties disappear after Cleisthenes. You don't need them anymore once you have that division into those tribes. When mixed by lot, citizens depart from the tribe and find themselves working together, especially to avoid civil strife, which is a major issue in antiquity. There's a fascinating inscription telling of the small city of Nacone in Sicily that had been torn in two by civil strife. It was too small to have a middle that cushions the two sides. As Aristotle says, you always need a middle, but there wasn't any. So instead of killing each other, they invited 5 arbitrators from Segesta, another city. They came and created by lot 60 pairs of brothers, adelphoi, one from each camp. Then they added by lot, randomly, another 3 persons to each couple, so you get a pentad times 60. So you get 60 pentads of citizens, provided there's no family relations, by the way. Somebody checked that. It says so in the description, excluding family relations. And now you have 60 pentads of citizens discussing issues, all the issues of running the country, not just the point in which they were not happy about. And the whole thing ends up with a new temple and annual cult to harmony. So you see, this is a Hellenistic mixture, an amazing solution for a civil strife by forcing people simply to talk to each other. Such mixture lotteries reshuffle the deck of society. The lot creates artificial ties that transcend entrenched political and social clusters. Such drawing of lots bypass deep-rooted, pre-existing lines of separation, implying an overarching homogenization of the political community. In fact, that is how our story, as we see, with democracy begins. After decades of tyranny and discrete power bases, the constitutive act of founding the Athenian state was a grand mixture by lottery, and then Cleisthenes went to Delphi and got by lot a choice of 10 heroes out of a list of 100 that he submitted to Apollo, or his priestess, the Pythia. Okay. The importance of mixture is supported by network theory, which I discussed quite a lot in a former book called Small Greek World. This network theory called the strength of weak ties. The strength of weak ties. So, discrete networks such as patronage, family groups, and so on constitute what Mark Granovetter calls strong ties. Since clusters of strong ties are often relatively small, it is difficult to reach out from them. It is rather the weak ties that hold a society together. Suppose you're looking for a job and the mother of a cousin of a friend of my daughter hears about a job. The mother of a cousin of a friend of my daughter hears about a job. That's a weak tie. You would never know it if you just keep asking your closest friend, who basically know each other and would ask each other. Okay, so that's a cluster of strong ties. So social systems based on strong ties can become fragmented and incoherent. New ideas will spread slowly and scientific endeavors will be handicapped. In other words, the mixture creates weak ties, which can form an all-encompassing, strong, and dynamic connectivity in a society. In other words, a political community based on strong ties is weak. A political community based on weak ties is strong. So, what about elections? The Athenians did have elections too. They chose the generals by election, the treasurers. Elections imply choosing representatives who would be the best men to do the job, as Thomas Jefferson thought. He believed in the natural existence of the best men, the natural existence of the best men, and recommended to John Adams, I quote, a pure selection of these natural aristoi, he's using the Greek word aristoi, into the offices of government. Aristoi are the best, of course. In ancient Greek, the rule of the best is literally aristokratia. So basically, Jefferson is suggesting an aristocracy, a republican aristocracy, which is what he envisaged. Today, instead of top-bottom rule of kings chosen by the grace of God, we have another form of top-bottom rule of elected officials for fixed terms, drawing their authority from the people. Although technically it is the bottom that elects the top. However, the vertical direction of politics is top-bottom, remains the same since the days of the Egyptian pharaohs. Even in liberal Western democracies, as the study of Bernard Manin has shown, both the French and the American revolutions preferred elections to the equality of democracy. It frightened them. What are you releasing here? So, Bernard Manin says, I quote, representative government was instituted in full awareness that elected representatives should be distinguished citizens, socially different from the ones who elected them, end quote. By contrast, Aristotle thought that there should be no distance between citizenship and rule. Political freedom consisted of governing and being governed in turn. This often rotation, as Herodotus says at the beginning. Instead of the top-bottom approach, the use of lot in politics implies a horizontal view of society. That's a major concept here, a horizontal view of society instead of top-bottom. It's a government truly by the people, involving all citizens who are both the source of power and of sovereignty, which is not delegated to representatives. As Thomas Jefferson reminds us, elections are about elites, aristoi. And nobody sounded better than Aristotle himself. He says, what is characteristic of an oligarchy are elections. What is characteristics of democracies is the drawing of lots. In short, oligarchies equal elections, democracies equal drawing of lots. Politics, book 4, 1294b, if anybody doesn't believe me. Democratic Athens kept extending the use of the lots while efficiently running the state for more than 2 centuries, even more now, being subjected, to outsiders. I'm often asked, okay, seriously, can this really help? Can this really work? Well, Daniel Kahneman got his Nobel Prize for the discovery that people don't believe facts. They don't believe truth. Okay, it worked. The experiment worked for over 2 centuries in antiquity when the best computer they had was a slab of stone with a hole in it. And it worked very well for a long time. For a population, by the way, not so small. I mean, Athens and Attica, the equivalent is to modern Iceland. Population, I don't mean full citizens. Should we reintroduce the lot into politics? It would undoubtedly be an excellent tool for increasing the level of sharing in the polis. Some current thinkers, mostly with political science orientation, like Yves Saint-Omer and others, recommend precisely this, pointing out the obvious advantages of the lot as a corrective mechanism of the system. Suggestions range from revising the existing political mechanisms to introducing new buffering organs into politics, like citizen committees, for example, could function as a buffer between present politicians and the public. No such buffer had existed when the British ran their referendum for the Brexit, with less than 52% voting to get out of Europe, with many admitting ignorance. That compare it to the two Irish referenda in 2015, 2017 or 18, was it? Allowing same-sex marriage and abortions. This is Catholic Ireland. Catholic Ireland voting close to 70% in both referenda to approve this. How did that happen? Because there were citizen committees that sat on the agenda for more than a year. They were chosen by lot. We're discussing things to invite experts like priests or politicians. Jerry Adams appeared there. And the whole public got educated that there is such a thing as love between people of the same sex. And I mean, instead of prejudice, it gave education through citizen committees, through the buffer, and they wrote the referendum, Parliament approved it, and close to 70% voted for. So I was wondering when I was doing this work, where did this idea come from originally in ancient Greece? The idea of drawing lots. It's not just from the whole spectrum of practices, but especially from the mindset. It's a key concept in my book, a mindset of viewing society horizontally, but with each individual discretely defined, equal, interchangeable with any other individual. All this had a long history before anyone had thought of introducing the lot into the political sphere. Today, the various suggestions to reintroduce sortition to politics are locked in a discourse that is too narrowly political. There's a suggestion now to vote the House of Lords in Great Britain by lot. It's a group that belongs to, called the Sortition Foundation. That exists, actually. We cannot simply adapt an ancient device to modern constructs without understanding and accepting the mindset of sharing and equality that were sadly different from our own. The Greek drawing of lots was directly linked to a whole set of values and practices of which politics was just one, a late expression. The social perspective involved a horizontal view of society as made of people sharing equal portions, or whatever portions they are, portions of the state, and rotating interchangeably with each other. During the 3 centuries before the invention of democracy, the lottery mindset had developed with a remarkable set of egalitarian values and a perception of the individual as holding an equal portion. A collective mindset, these are my words, is a common mental frame of reference that endures through time and is expressed when reacting to similar contexts and issues. It may be self-aware or not, and can be expressed in language, values, myths, collective representations, and the implementation in practice. A mindset is tantamount to, well, that's how we do things, based on values, customs, and traditions that form a world view. The first introduction of the lot to politics came, as I said, with the foundation of Athenian democracy by Cleisthenes. To understand those categories of drawing lots, I define them as follows. Distributive lotteries define the contours of the relevant group or the community, which is also sovereign to decide about the action of drawing lots. They express a horizontal vision of society, the reverse of the vertical top-bottom view of authority. Distributive lotteries were employed to distribute inheritance, sacrificial meat, colonial lands, booty, catch, and positions in the state. Even the entire cosmos and the provinces of the gods were believed to have been distributed by lot by and among the Greek gods. Now, selective lotteries, too, imply the contours of some group, when picking soldiers for military campaigns, colonists for new settlements, warriors for special tasks, and at some point, even sorting out who were to be worshipped as the ancestral tribal heroes at Athens. Procedural lotteries were especially useful for rotation and turns, such as guard shifts, stations on a race course, which is also happening today, allocation of court cases, and rotating days of the presidency of the Athenian Council. In the 5th century, even entire theaters of war could be assigned to generals by lot. Then mixture lotteries were used to homogenize the mother cities at the time of the foundation of new colonies, and to do the same in the colonies, mixing the nucleus of settlers from specific mother city with other Greek settlers who joined the foundation. Also to mix the people to avoid dissension and civil strife, so the example of Laconi, and to reshuffle the deck of Athenian citizens to create the basis of Athenian democracy. Finally, there is a religious category, divination by lot, or lot oracles, a discrete category for divining the intention of the gods for ad hoc issues, so especially popular at Delphi and Dodona. Let's take, for example, the subject of inheritance. As I said, no primogeniture. Upon the death of the inheritance becomes a whole, to be split up into equal or equitable portions that had been agreed upon in advance, either directly or through an arbitrator, and then, say, two brothers had agreed in advance what is equal, then they draw lots. Okay? They can no longer argue about equal or equitable. They have decided upon that already, but neither brother knows which one he's getting. Okay? So it's a recurrent pattern throughout the Greek world, except, for example, in other types of distribution. I have a whole chapter in this book about sacrificial meat, which may sound strange to you, but if you chop up an entire ox and cook it, you would envy the guy who gets the filet mignon. But if he gets it by lot, no problem. You don't resent that anymore. So, to resume, public partible inheritance by lot, there's no primogeniture, but it's a fractal of society because it implies that the group is predefined, all its members have shares, all are interchangeable, the authority stems from within the group, an arbitrator may help resolve a dispute about family inheritance or resolve a civil strife, and we observe no recognized innate hierarchy. All group members are interchangeable. For example, the first block, son A and son B, two brothers each getting half a kleros, but this is also an encouragement to let one brother have an entire kleros and let the other brother go abroad and colonize, where he'd get a kleros by lot as part of the settlement. So you have to think not just of the specific house of the brother, but of the entire map of the Mediterranean, which is part of the possibilities and options that people had. If you look at sacrifice, for example, equal portions distributed by lot. In an essay entitled Table Talk, Plutarch complains that ever since luxury is kept in, the good old days were back then, as people always say, the custom of equal share for all in the feast, isomoiria, equal sharing, was abandoned, he says. However, he continues, in public and traditional rituals, equality is still preserved, and he says, even now, at sacrifices and public banquets, each guest is still served his equal portion of the meal. Note the emphasis on equality over time. It is part of the egalitarian mindset. And of course, the Greeks ate meat, only sacrificed meat. Unlike fish, the meat always had to be sacrificed, so it's part of the ritual too. Perhaps the best place to observe a mindset is religion and especially myth. You know, the Greeks didn't have a transcendent God as a subject for whom the world was an object, as the three great monotheistic religions of today still claim. Let there be light. The Olympians were third-generation gods. They didn't create the world. They were born into it and won their supremacy by violent revolution. In the Iliad, we are told how Hades, Zeus, and Poseidon conducted a drawing of lots, the result of which was Zeus got to heaven, Hades the underworld, and Poseidon the sea. This myth is also a good starting point to refute the facile notion that prevented many scholars ever studying this subject. By the way, this book is the first of its kind. The last study on the subject was published in 1891 by James Wycliffe Headland, and just on Athens. So I thought I'd be writing a small popular book when I started working on this for modern political purposes, but then I discovered that there was nothing there. Why wasn't there nothing there? Because it's not nice. It's gambling. It's smacks of randomality. Those rational Greeks, come on. So, and that's why I think it's this is so important, because these gods conducted a lottery among themselves. Surely they were not doing that in order to discover the will of the gods. They were the gods. So already Hesiod talks about the divine distribution of the world by lot. He says, he's talking to the muse, tell how at first gods and earth came to be, sings Hesiod in Theogony, and how the god divided their wealth among themselves, and how they share their honors, timai, among themselves. Okay. Now, in the 15th book of the Iliad, Zeus orders all the gods who are actually in the field of battle to get out and let the humans kill each other as much as they want. So Poseidon is very angry. He doesn't like that. He says, who is he to tell me what to do? No, great though he is, this that he has said is too much. If he will force me against my will, me, who am his equal in rank, homotimon, since we are three brothers, all was divided among us 3 ways, each given his domain. When the lots were shaken, I drew the great sea to live in forever. Hades drew the lot of the mists and the darkness, and Zeus was allotted the white sky and the clouds and the bright air, but earth and high Olympus are common to all 3. By the way, it goes on a bit after this quote. So he's both telling the story of the divine lottery that distributed the portion of the world, as well as the common areas that reserved a part. He's claiming equal status, but Zeus was the king of the gods, which is not chosen by lot, by the way. He was elected to that position. It's another passage in Hesiod. And there was one god who somehow missed. He wasn't there. This is Helios, the sun god, who was up in the sky and he was doing the lottery. And when he came down, everything was already distributed. When Zeus and the immortals were dividing up the earth among them, Rhodos was not yet visible in the expanse of the sea, but the island was hidden in the salty depths. Helios was absent, and no one marked out an allotted share, lachos, from Namchano, for him. In fact, they've left him without any kleros, aklaroton, although he was a holy god. So Zeus suggests, let's do another lottery from the start. And he said, no, everybody will be angry with me. Hey, there's an island at the bottom of the ocean. Let's lift it up. It wasn't part of the original lottery because it was at the bottom of the ocean. And that, in fact, became the island of Rhodes, always dedicated to the god Helios, as it were. So we are not ancient Greeks and should not make assumptions that too easily bridge the gap between then and now. It is a mistake to have too much intellectual empathy. Ancient Greeks did not necessarily think the way we do, nor did they share our attitudes and worldview. However, whereas we may have enormous sympathy for Greek reason, philosophy, and theater, and history, drawing of lots, the origin of our democracy, are outside our field of vision. Lotteries might seem weird, perhaps distasteful, smackling of the ill repute of gambling, and are often explained away paradoxically. Rational scholars like Jean-Pierre Vernant try to save ancient Greek rationality by claiming that Greeks used all the lots, all the time, irrationality as a tool of divination. For every action, you want to know, what do the gods think? But Greeks did not live in the manner of Luke Reinhardt's, you know this book, The Dice Man, or Boches, Babylonian Lottery. Those ancient rational Greeks made a rational decision to apply a random device to many aspects of their lives, and reasonably so. The lot implies interchangeability, which in turn implies equality. There's a soldier in the Iliad who recounts how his family conducted a lottery to decide which one of his brothers should go fight in Troy. All brothers, are interchangeable, all are equal, and the eldest could expect no special status, even in inheritance. My father, says Hermes in disguise actually, has 6 sons besides, and I am the 7th, and I shook lots with the others. It was my lot to come on this venture. Similarly, equality and interchangeability are historically evident already in the 7th century BCE, when the people of the island of Thera sent out a colony to Cyrene, to Libya. They held a statewide lottery among all those households possessing a minimum of 2 sons to choose which brother will depart. This is Herodotus who's saying the Therians, he's quoting, as it were, paraphrasing the official decree of Thera. The Therians determined to send out men from their 7 regions, taking by lot 1 of every pair of brothers. Or in the 4th century copy of the original foundation decree of Cyrene, they are to sail in equal and fair terms, isai kai homoiai, according to households. 1 son to be chosen from each family, apparently, of those who are in the prime of life. But this is serious business. I mean, you need a registry of the entire population to determine what households. You conduct the drawing of lots only in those households, and you actually forcefully send 1 brother away, as in any conscription, basically, like such as military ones. So the Greek lot expressed values of equality and fairness that are distinct from ours. Does fairness consist in getting what you deserve? And this is a philosophical question already. I looked at those in the pirate codes of Henry Morgan, Captain Phillips, and all these. It's considered fair that the captain should get 8 portions of booty and the cook 2, and the deck boy a quarter of a portion. But Greek fairness, in contrast, was mostly not understood as proper to your station in life, to your status, but equal chances before the lottery, and surprisingly, equal results as well. And everybody shares. Achilles in the Iliad already protests, stay home or fight your hardest, your share will be the same. Coward and hero are given equal honor. So his protest actually testified to the so-called reality when everybody gets a share. I mean, this is... Now, the notion connects politically with another concept, because booty is brought to the middle, esto meson, and the middle in ancient Greek can also mean, well, democracy. There's a scene in Samos when he's offered tyranny, this guy, and he's returning power esto meson to the middle, to the public. The French structuralists love this concept because they always draw lines between the middle and the periphery, and sometimes correctly. Theognis, 7th or 6th centuries, connects the social order with allotments. The poet employs the metaphor of the ship of state and complains that they seize possessions by force, and discipline or order, cosmos, is lost. No longer is there an equal distribution in the common interest. Well, this is the translation that you read in the classical library. It's a good translation on the whole. But literally, it doesn't say that. Literally, it says, when the sharing out, dasmos, is still brought esto meson, to the middle, to be shared out equally, isos. Okay, so you see how sometimes the modern translation elides over the meaning, and then you can lose everything because the whole key concepts are lost in this particular case. But I'm not blaming the translator. It doesn't make sense in English if you say the literal translation here. For example, when founding a colony over newly possessed land, and land too was kind of booty, settlers would draw lots for equally sized portions of land, which were necessarily different from each other. They were equally sized, but one was in the center, one was in the periphery. One had good soil, the other didn't. So again, the results look the same in terms of measure, but not the same in terms of value. That is why you have isos kai homoios. They're like each other. Homoios, not precisely equal. And such new settlers were to sail, as we just saw in Thera, on equal and fair terms, signifying equal and fair indeed. It also works in the Greek imagination. This is the way Apollodorus talks about the conquest of the Peloponnesos under the leadership of the descendants of Heracles. I quote, when they had made themselves master of the Peloponnese, they, the Dorians, set up 3 altars of paternal Zeus and sacrificed upon them and cast lots for the cities. So the first drawing was for Argos, the second for the Lacedaemon Sparta, and the third for Messene. Now let's zoom in on Sparta. This is what Plutarch says, who knows what is true here or not, about the legendary or half-legendary founder of Sparta, Lycurgus. The second measure of Lycurgus is his redistribution, ges anadasmos, redistribution of the land. He persuaded his fellow citizens to make one parcel of all their territory, again, translation, literally, to bring it to the middle, es meson, as one did with heaps of booty, and divide it up anew, ex antres, and to live with one another on the basis of entire uniformity and equality. Now, suiting deed to the word, he distributed the rest of the Laconian land among the perioikoi in 30,000 lots, kleroi, and that which belonged to the city of Sparta in 9,000 lots, to as many genuine Spartans. And here you have the basic formula: 1 kleros, 1 oikos, or 1 kleros, 1 household. The number of kleroi should be equal to the number of citizens. And the number of the kleros is the basic constitutive element of sharing in the city, if you're working on the basis of equality. These were called protokleroi, the first lots. In early times, says Aristotle, in many states there was even a legislation prohibiting the sale of the original allotment, the protokleroi. At Locri, for example, there is a law that a man shall not sell his land unless he can prove that manifest misfortune has befallen him, and also there's legislation to preserve the old allotments. It's a little bit, there's a big difference here between modern concepts of property and what you see here. A distinction between the protoskleros, which is inalienable, you cannot sell it, you cannot split it up, it has to remain the same. Usually they're not that big, but it's basic concrete expression of sharing in the city. Otherwise, it's chremata, you can sell and buy as much as you want. You know, at some point in the Odyssey, Odysseus and his companions distribute booty consisting of goats. Odysseus conducts a lottery, a drawing of lot. So, I quote, no one will be deprived of his equal share, end quote. So, distributing 9 goats per ship by lot. He could have made a simple distribution, 9 goats per ship. Why do you need a lot? Because some of the goats were young and fat and delicious, and some were old billy goats that you wouldn't like to get. So it's fair. Again, the concept of fairness. A big effort of our part was to study, this is just an illustration of equal portions of lots in a Greek colony. This is Megara Hiblaya in Sicily, excavated by the École Française de Rome. And just to illustrate, these are the plans of the initial site, founded in 728 BC. It's very early. And here you see the equality of the lots, the house lots, actually programmed inside the city. So the vocabulary of drawing lots was hardly studied except for this one person, a Czech scholar who studied in London under George Thompson, one of the very few, if not the only, ardent Marxist among British classicists at the time. And so was his student. And because of the type of language and terminology these people were using, they were basically ignored by the classical establishment. And Boretsky found a job in Prague, communist Prague at the time. But his book is fantastic. It's rudimentary. It doesn't cover it too much. He didn't have enough epigraphy at his hand, but for what he did, it's quite impressive. Survivals of some tribal ideas. Oh, the moment you see tribal ideas, you chuck out the book. I mean, what is that, tribal ideas? It's a Marxist concept. But never mind. Take a deep breath. Survivals of some tribal ideas in classical Greek. The use and meaning of lanchano, dateomai, and the origin of ison echein, ison nemein, and related idioms. Okay? Isos is equal, those who know Greek. Okay? So this was very significant. So we decided to update all this and look at, those who know Greek, look at these words. Notably lanchano, which is quite significant, as well as, but all this vocabulary is already in Homer, which means by the time we read the Iliad and the Odyssey, all these elements have been in place for a long time, forming the foundation of the Greek mindset. And these are all to be found in the Kleros ORGIL database site that I recommended before. So this is just an example of what we do here. Kleros meaning distribution in the whole corpus of Greek literature, excluding oratory, because very often it's a technical term in forensic speeches, and kleros meaning distribution in prose, excluding oratory. This is an example of the work we did with lanchano. That was very significant because if you open the dictionary under lanchano, it will tell you lanchano means to get something by lot. Great. But second meaning, lanchano means to get. Period. So how do you know? And that's why you need the context. And that's why the study in prose and poetry and plays and epigraphy and so on, we came out with a very solid conclusion that close to 73% of the occurrences of lanchano are in fact in the context of drawing lots. That is very important, especially if you read inscriptions, sacrificial inscriptions, for example, that often have lanchano, but you want to be sure what it means. Did anybody simply get a piece of meat, or did they get that piece of meat by lot? And now we are far more certain that they did get it by lot, so you create a general context, philological context, for the specific meaning of certain elements. When I was doing this work, I find myself running to different sections of the library or different libraries altogether, because every subject had a different academic categorization. I wanted to study inheritance, I had to go to the law library to study Greek law, to study Greek property. I wanted to understand sacrifice, no, that's under Greek religion, completely different catalog numbers in the library and so on. Booty, study Greek practices of war. Oracles, Greek religion. Clero in Greek colonies, the archaeology and history of Greek colonization. Usually, people who study one of those categories don't look at the other categories to understand their own. I think one of the major conclusions from the study that is being moved around among you is precisely the mutual reflection of these categories, one on another. Inheritance reflects on booty, reflects on sacrifice, reflects on clero in colonies. For example, that diagram I showed before with the two brothers, one remaining at home, one going abroad. So the mutual reflections of all these also helped me, I think, to understand better the basic egalitarian mindset that we could see there. So we would never have seen the birth of democracy without the mindsets and the practices that made it both conceivable and possible. It wasn't my purpose here to provide an analysis of the working Athenian democracy, to provide a systematic critique of representative government, or even to suggest specific recipes for implementing the drawing of lots today. Distribution by lots are being attempted today, and hopefully there will be more to come. But I urge us to remember the inherent problem with political parties and representation. They get elected on agendas that often contradict each other, those of their opponents, but once elected, they are meant to, at least, to think in terms of the entire welfare of the country, which is in contradiction to their own specific agendas. That's structurally inherent problem here. Okay? Sadly, candidates and parties are also dependent on money and are prone to yield to undue influence, a problem which the lot avoids altogether. Nobody has proven to date that problem solving by a large members of group of intelligent people is any less efficient than decisions taken by the best and the brightest, usually a small group of consultants to a president or someone. You can hardly charge them with cognitive diversity. They can often think alike. They went to the same universities. There's a great book already written a long time ago by David Halberstam called The Best and the Brightest about the Kennedy era and his. All of them went to the exact same university. All were Rhodes scholars, always thinking precisely alike, and strong ties. Again, they were confirming each other's opinions all the time, as well as their mistakes. The lot does not select according to merit or expertise. That's the sore point of criticism already in antiquity. Plato has Socrates object to the use of the lot. Socrates says, I don't want the player of the flute to be chosen by lot. I want the captain of my ship. I want to be chosen by lot. I want somebody professional who knows how to run a ship. The Athenians would say, no, we disagree. Oh, there will be a captain of a ship, the Kubernetes. His commander, however, will be a triarchos, usually a wealthy person, chosen by lot. There were 200 persons every year. And he'd pay from his own pocket for the upkeep of the ship for the entire year, but he would also get the honor of being its commander. Which ship he will command, that's chosen by lot. So, also to prevent what happened in ancient Rome, namely developing personal allegiance to your commander and finally fighting with your commander against your country, which was very often the case. It is time to readjust our aims and revitalize the ancient horizontal worldview instead of merely inventing another way to a top-bottom rule of elected representatives. The arguments against sortition mostly concern efficiency, professionalism, and long-term planning. Perhaps we need to think of a combination of the lot with elections, as the Athenians did, and several thinkers today have also suggested. Perhaps we could enhance public involvement in various modalities, such as citizen committees. But most of all, we should take note of the egalitarian mindset and values that concern the equal and like, isos kai homoios, the equal and like portions of a citizen as articulated by ancient Greeks. It would behoove us to remember what our democracy is based on and the basic mindset that led to its birth. The ancient Greek mindset with its egalitarian values, the ancient horizontal perspective instead of the hierarchical top-bottom, the idea of the citizen as a sharer that made the ancient democracy possible. Their lack today might disintegrate our own. Thank you.
Thank you so much for this amazing lecture. And now we have some time to comments, questions, whatever you want. It's your last opportunity to in this official contest, of course. But please don't feel shy and ask us your questions if you want, or comments. And then Frederico. Yes, you ask first.
Thank you again, Professor Irad Malkin, for this wonderful lecture on such stimulating topic. Two small comments. One regarding, as you said, it is central to your point and to the arguments that you developed so clearly that the Greek mindset towards egalitarianism is extremely important. Don't you think that there may be some kind of contradiction between, for example, this idea, with which I agree, but why should the Greeks keep, faithful to the idea of having a polis and not a nation, for example, where this idea of, let's say, embracing them with something that was common could be, let's say, advanced. And related to this, the examples you have shown us are mainly from the Homer, archaic and classical times, but do you think that this idea of drawing lots could be somehow present in the idea of those koinoi normoi, those common laws that became, so to say, an expression of the Greek mindset in the Hellenistic period? What I mean by this question is, of course, in the Hellenistic period, we are in a very different, atmosphere. We have kings, so how should this idea of something that is so specifically Greek was kept? Is it kept like, let's say, like a fiction, so to say, that was accepted and performed like that, or was it put into practice? Thank you very much.
Well, thank you. The other major questions here. First of all, I don't want to give the wrong impression. There was elitism in ancient Greek society. In fact, very often you find conflicts between precisely that, the elitist and the horizontal visions. And sometimes you get weird results, such as an oligarchy with what looks like democratic ideas, namely everybody's equal, but the circle of participants is much narrower. Okay, so the oligarchy at Thebes, they called themselves isonomia at one point. This is in Thucydides. So it's not so simple, which also you can immediately jump to the Hellenistic period, where surprisingly there were many more democracies. We're not always sure how oligarchic or democratic they were, and the drawing of lots became far more spread. It was only really in Athens that the drawing of lots had such a full spectrum of expression. It did exist in other cities and for other matters, like I've shown. But Athens in the classical period was a bit exceptional. Surprisingly, in the Hellenistic period, you get much more of that. And it's the issue of common laws seem to be very ancient. I mean, there's a point where the Athenians are leaving the fort of Delium and leaving it back to the Boeotians, and the law of the Greeks, the nomos, ton Helenon, is that you have to keep the sanctuary working regardless who's controlling it. I'm paraphrasing. But the notions of Greek laws, or norms, we should say, was quite common. So, yes, elitism and egalitarianism, there were even Greek tyrants in Greek history, right? So it's a constant tension between the two, except that the horizontal vision in ancient Greece seems far more prominent than in any other ancient society I can think of. So it's a point of comparison here. Now, as for the question, polis and a nation, well, that's almost a meta-historical question. I don't know. Clearly, the notion of drawing lots defines the contours of those participating. Okay, you arrive in a new place. You have to distribute lands to new colonists. You don't want just anybody joining in. You want the people to distribute among those who are recognized. So there's a contour, there's inclusion and exclusion. To what extent that could be in antiquity extended to a nation? I'm not so sure. But there's a new study of drawing lots in Rome, by the way, by Julie Botorel, which I haven't seen yet. I'd be curious to know. I think Roman provinces were distributed by lots, but I'm not a Roman historian, so correct me here. Okay?
Thank you. Now, Frederic.
So first of all, thank you. Hello. Thank you very much for this wonderful lecture. I have two questions. My first question you answered towards the end of your lecture, because I found myself asking myself as you were speaking if Greek authors that we know of were aware of the fact that egalitarianism is very desirable, but people are not equally able. So the fact that when you draw lots and you choose people by lots to a certain function, how do you then cope with the problem that even in an egalitarian society, people are naturally not equally able? But you mentioned Socrates, what Plato attributes to Socrates, saying that he wouldn't want to be on a ship where the captain had been chosen by lot. And probably many of us wouldn't want to have our eyes operated on by a ophthalmologist who had been chosen by lot, because we'd probably prefer to go to the best ophthalmologist. So that was the first question, but you answered that.
Between private medicine and public one, right?
But the second question, one gets the impression that lots and kleros is a concept that is uniquely linked to ancient Greece. And so my question is, how would you compare this custom with the ancient Hebrew custom? Because in the Bible, the Hebrew Bible, the so-called Old Testament, or what modern scholars call the Deuteronomistic history, so the book of Joshua, when the Israelites come out of Egypt and they settle in the new land, the word, since I know the Greek, I don't know enough Hebrew to read the Bible in Hebrew, but I know the Greek translation, the Septuagint, and the word kleros is constantly used in the Greek translation. So how would you compare the use of kleros and drawing by lot in a historical context, which is much earlier, because, well,
it depends when you think the book of Joshua was composed.
No. I don't mean, I'm referring to what the book of Joshua purports to describe, not when it was composed, because it might have been composed in the 5th century, well, who knows, but it purports to describe a reality that was at least 500 years before, more than that. So,
Right.
so that's the question.
Well, thank you for this question very much. So the first question has to do with competence, namely your ability to perform the job to which you were selected by lot. Well, the Athenians, the only answer they gave is let's throw in huge numbers. So the number of idiots among this group will be negligible, basically. It's very different if you have a jury of 12 persons and 4 of them are idiots. So what do you do then? But if you have 200 of them, it doesn't matter that much. I think this is what an Athenian would answer you. I mean, I have no idea. We don't have answers to what Socrates is raising there. And again, the fascinating thing for me is that the Athenian Boule, composed precisely of citizens chosen by lot, had to prepare the laws to be brought before the assembly. I mean, somebody must have known something, and perhaps people simply knew. It's something we just don't know, but clearly it worked. We have to remember that it actually, we keep having hypothetical why it couldn't, or why it shouldn't, or why it wouldn't, but it did. And not only did it do that, it kept expanding the circles and the fields where the lot was applied to. When the first lottery was political lottery in 487, the archons started being chosen by lot, selected by lot. But from among whom? Ekton prokriton, from a predefined list of those who wanted to be in, and only from the upper echelons of economic echelons of society. But when you get to the time of Aristotle, it's ek hapanton, from everyone. So just like today, there's no such thing as democracy. There's a regime with a framework called democracy, and there's always constant struggle between more democratization and retreat from more democratization, as is happening in some countries today. So that's one basic issue here. Now, the book of Joshua and in Judges too, you get a variety of the uses of lots. The distribution of the specific territories assigned to specific tribes is done by lot. There's a case when the Israelites conquered the city of Jericho, and God says, don't touch the booty. It's cherem, it's not supposed to be that way. And there's one person, his name is Achan, who does do that. And then there's a kind of a, the Hebrew word is to trap, veilkod. And so first they're having a lottery among the people, then they define which tribe is responsible. Then they follow which family is responsible, then which person is responsible. And he's being stoned to death, and everything is good. In the Talmud, the same story is told a little differently. It's as if Achan at the end says, "What do you mean? You chose me by lot? That's how you decided I'm guilty? What's going on here?" There's a new book by someone called Shraga Bar-On, sadly only in Hebrew at this point, about the history of drawing lots in Judaism up to the High Middle Ages. It's quite fascinating, I have to say. The first king of Israel, King Shaul, King Saul, was chosen by lot. So that does exist. In Assyrian temple records, we find priests chosen by lot, as well as in the ancient Jewish temple in Jerusalem. So the use of the lot is not a Greek invention, but the spectrum of its use is. The wide variety of practices is. The application to such things as from inheritance to distributing a chunk of meat is in fact, it's a question of degree, and degree becomes critically important. As for the difference, other than that, the Old Testament, that's basically the list of cases that we had, a few more now and then. And in the book of Proverbs, there's a thinking about what it means. Is the result of drawing lots a divine decision or not? And that does exist there too. Well, I'll stop here.
One more.
Yes, please. What's up?
Hi, good morning. Sorry, my voice is a little bit cracking up. And I start by apologizing because I was a little late to your conference, so I might have missed some important points concerning what I want to ask. So 2 quick questions. First, as you know, I'm a philosopher, not a class assistant, so I'm always thinking about how your book or your contribution can be important even beyond classical studies. So first thing, we had a conversation the other day about the conversation you had with David Van Gogh about your book. And I guess the book might be very important because it feeds into this renewed look into the past that adds more complexity to what, archaic Greece and other civilizations were doing at the time. And I'm always wondering about the ideal of rationality behind drawing lots, because it has been thrown into irrationality because of chance, etc., not taking sufficiently into stock competence, expertise, etc. But I wonder if you could phrase the rationality between drawing lots as a framework of justification. A framework of justification. That is, it is somehow rational to draw lots because we don't resent the result and it can actually work, let's say. And so even though the circle of participation is narrow, between equals within the circle of participation, drawing lots is somehow rational. Second quick question. The relevance of what you're saying and what you're proposing for contemporary political theory and democratic theory, because as you know, there's a lot of debate going on between how much civic participation we need in order to have sound democracies. And there's basically 3 standpoints: the liberal Democrats, the status quo, that said what we have is fine. On the other hand, the more radical Democrats that want to push for more direct democracy and so more participation, and that are advocating, among other things, sortition in citizens' forms, etc. And then the epistocrats on the other side that basically are saying we need less democracy, not more, because we need expertise. It's not fair to give the same rights of democratic participation to people who are idiots and to people who are, experts in what they're saying. And so I guess that your book feeds into all those political theories that are arguing we need to have more citizen participation, perhaps by drawing lots and have, this mixture between political actors, experts, citizens, etc. How would you elaborate on what your proposal might be for this? Sorry, ended up not being so quick. Sorry.
What is irrational about drawing lots, actually? What is it? It's a serious question, and if you look at the history of attitudes towards drawing lots, it's also fascinating. In the Middle Ages, generalize for a moment, the religious argument against drawing lots was, since God is behind everything that happens, you shouldn't just throw dice all the time because you're trivializing something very significant. Okay, but until in 1617, I think, Thomas Gattaker in Britain wrote a treatise on this, mocking this religious notion, saying, since every throw of the dice is contrary, do you actually blame God for being arbitrary, contrary, and making bad decisions all the time? No, you shouldn't. So, therefore, God is not behind every throw of the dice. Maybe that's in the background of Albert Einstein's famous dictum that God doesn't play dice with the universe. Well, he does, apparently, as modern chaos theory seems to think. And so the question of rationality has to be observed within the total framework where the drawing of lots was operating. And in my view, he was very rational. I mean, if you read, I've read a few books about randomality in general. I'm not a philosopher. I'm trying to. Apparently, also, a friend of mine who's a physicist said that today, if you introduce some random elements into a system, you actually make it more stable, more coherent, because nothing works perfectly with everything planned as it should. So, a priori, you need some randomality in it. So again, and to repeat the sentence before, against the notion of la cité des raisons, this is the Jean-Pierre Vernon famous dictum. There's whole articles with this title quoted. He writes a lot about the thing in democracy, not a word about drawing lots. By the way, since ancient Greeks were not writing treatises and praising democracy, usually have anti-democratic texts, if anything. The only one that is often quoted is the speech by Pericles in favor, extolling the virtues of democracy. He never mentions the drawing of lots. And again, because it's not a value, it's a device. It's a device to achieve the purposes about which he does talk, namely involvement. Which brings me to the second question. In 1965, Bernard Crick published a book called In Defense of Politics, bemoaning the fact that people have become alienated, have contempt to politicians, 65, okay? And people are shying away from the political, the abstract sense of the political. In German, it sounds better, das Politischen. But, several editions have been published since. I highly recommend it. It's a very good book. And the whole point is to return to looking at politics from the bottom up, from the life experience of the citizen, the sense of being involved in something greater than yourself, part of your society. And this is exactly, we are today moving in the exact opposite direction. We are stuck in our phones, we're stuck in our internet tribes. They may be huge, but they're still tribal. And we just thinking about what happened, people watching news in the United States. There's a tribe of Fox News, there's a tribe of CNN, there's a tribe. They don't talk to each other, they don't know what each other is saying. They're not mixed, in short. The only mixture, and I have American friends that said that the great experience was to be selected by lot to be a member of a jury. Suddenly, you spoke to your mechanic, not about your car, but about something else. And it's a mixture that you don't usually find. That is one of the arguments for universal conscription for an army, any army. Because it brings society together. You know suddenly, you talk to people, and perhaps this will be the only time in your life you'll do that, but you do that. So mixture is a fundamental thing, and it's very rational.
Thank you very much. I think we now have arrived to our time. A lot of time. So I will ask final applause to Professor Irad Malkin and invite you to join us in a shared table in a few minutes at 1 p.m. in front. What?
No lots.
No lots there, but it is shared because everybody took something. If we buy it or we make it, it's no point. It's not important. The important thing is that we'll be together sharing a moment of conviviality. And thank you again, Professor Irad Malkin, for coming to Coimbra and applied for the Gulbenkian Professorship 2024.
Thank you for having me.